we'll soon be talking with the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Anthony Foxx. But before we do, in Maryland, the Democratic legislators have overridden a veto by Governor Larry Hogan that would about a bill that would allow prisoners who are on probation or parole to register to vote in Maryland starting next month. The governor vetoed it, but this legislature is predominantly Democratic, and so is virtually veto-proof.
Yes, it's some. But sorry, my phone. I'm turning my phone off even as you speak.
I heard it. Yes.
Okay, but there's something like 44,000 people on probation or parole, and the legislature passed legislation that would allow these former inmates, I guess, former, what are they called now? Anyway, to vote, and the governor vetoed it, saying that he thought that the people who had been incarcerated or on probation or parole should finish their sentences before they get to vote. But the legislature did overwhelmingly override that veto. It's not that unusual. The District of Columbia, several other states have the same policy.
13 states have the same policy. Now, the politics of it, do you think that is because the governor feels that if ex-felons are allowed to vote, the overwhelming majority of them may likely vote Democrat?
Well, that might be, but I think I take Governor Hogan as a word that he thinks people ought to finish their sentences. I mean, I don't think I have to add additional political spin to it, although that would be one of the benefits of
the
thinking
politics
that.
Hour.
Well, it is the politics hour, but I think the larger picture here is that the Democrats in the Maryland State House are going to be much tougher going forward with all kinds of things Hogan has done or is doing, and they've overridden every veto he's done.
On now to our first guest, who is Anthony Foxx, the U.S. Secretary of Transportation. He joins us by phone. Secretary Foxx, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Kojo. Hi, Tom. Good to talk to you.
A top Metro official resigned last night after attempting to explain to Metro's board why an empty Orange Line train overran a red signal last week near Smithsonian Station, nearly colliding with a train carrying passengers. The top official oversaw rail operations, which are key in the safety train. Do you know what happened, and is this a sign of things to come? Do you expect WMATA more broadly to reorganize or for more top management to resign?
Well, let's be very clear. Last year, I told my Federal Transit Administration to take over the oversight of WMATA safety because we weren't seeing the kind of robust safety oversight from the State Safety Office, the TOC. And the bottom line is that WMATA has some significant problems with its safety culture. I've said that very publicly, and we're doing everything we can at USDOT to force everybody who has anything to do with WMATA to focus on safety. And these changes, if they improve safety, of course, we support.
Mr. Secretary, it's Tom Sherwood here from Channel 4 News. You have a huge portfolio, something like 55,000 employees.
Sure.
I don't know what your billion-dollar budget is, but billions. How much time are you personally spending on this? I'm not sure. Do you even get to ride Metro much, except for ceremonial occasions?
Actually, I was on WMATA last week, and I do secret shop every now and then in the local area. The bottom line here is that we've got a system that should be the crown jewel of America's transit systems, and it is falling into a state where the safety focus has not been there. That's why last week I sent a letter to both governors and the mayor of D.C. Basically saying that if we don't see the region get its act together on safety, we're going to start cutting some of the transit money, not just for WMATA, but for those jurisdictions in places that are even not served by WMATA.
Wouldn't that make Metro worse if it got less capital funding?
That's the problem. You know what? I've heard that argument so many times, and I'm kind of getting short on patience because I don't want the federal government to be enabling some of the safety culture failures that we're seeing. We need to be enabling an improvement in the safety culture. Okay. And so we're going to focus intensely on this, and we're going to make sure WMATA gets it right.
Well, I remember, states had to be forced to pass seatbelt laws in order to get federal transportation funding. So it makes sense, the policy there. Jack Evans, the new chairman of Metro, was on the Kojo Hour a couple of weeks ago. And he said that Metro must show that it can run its operations safely, efficiently, cleanly. And he said that he hopes to do that with the new general manager. But he also said that the federal government, who has many thousands of employees that depend upon Metro, is not a full partner in this operation. While there is federal money for infrastructure matters, there's no operating money. When will there be operating money from the federal government to help fund the entire Metro system on which so many federal employees depend?
Well, it's been more than 30 years since the federal government provided operating support to any transit agency around the country. That was a feature of the Reagan years. And so we just don't do that anywhere.
Even in the heart of the nation, the nation's capital, and the seat of the federal government?
Although WMATA has historically gotten special dispensation from Congress to support both its construction and in some cases some of its operating support. So I think WMATA has had a sweetheart deal for a long time, but it can't abuse that sweetheart deal by not taking care of its business. And that's the thing that we're trying to turn the focus on. And that's why I've sent this letter last week to the governors and to the mayor. And that's also why I continue to push really hard to make sure we get things better.
Have you spoken to the new general manager more than courtesy, or to Jack Evans?
I have spoken to the new general manager. I'm looking forward to spending more time with him. I think having Paul Wiederfeld in is a good step, but we've got a lot more work to do. And frankly, it's not just the staffing and the management, although that's a big part of it. The jurisdictions have to get serious about this to get us out of the business of overseeing their safety oversight. We need the legislatures of both Virginia and Maryland to step up to the plate, as well as the council in D.C., and pass a revised measure to reconstitute their TOC. And they told me when I was
reconstitute their what?
Their TOC, their state safety oversight organization, and that is something that's the organization that oversees safety. It points out where there are safety failures, and it requires, if it's done well, that those issues be addressed in real time. And what's happened with WMATA is they basically had a dysfunctional state safety oversight function. So we're taking the place of them at FTA by looking over their shoulders and doing 39 inspections as we've done to this point. But that's not work the federal government does really anywhere else. We're doing that because of failures here, but we want to get out of that business and get them doing the work they should be doing.
Mr. Secretary, I'd like to ask about your plans to appoint new WMATA board members to represent the federal government. What will be your goal in selecting those representatives? And there have been complaints in the past that the federal representatives on WMATA really didn't seem to report to anyone. What's going to be your connection to them?
Well, for whatever reason, I don't know the history, but the General Service Administration had previously been tasked with appointing board members from the federal government to the WMATA board. And back in December, Congress changed that to give that authority to the U.S. Department of Transportation. And that's why I'm going through and reviewing everybody that's on the board who's a federal appointee today. And I'll have more to say later, but you can bet that the focus for me is going to be on making sure we have board appointees who are laser focused on safety.
How much later will we hear these appointees? I know Harriet Trigoni that's on there. She's a former city official now with HUD, who has a pretty good reputation, but I'm not sure how much later will it be before we see these changes.
Well, again, keep in mind this bill was passed on December 4th. I'm going through the process now. I'm hopeful by the end of this month I'll have more to say.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Anthony Fox is the U.S. Secretary of Transportation. You're listening to the Politics Hour. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a reporter with NBC4. He's also a columnist with the current newspapers. You can follow the broadcast by going to our website, kojoshow.org, watching the live video stream there. And now our guest is Libby Garvey. She is the Arlington County Board Chair. She joins us in studio. Libby Garvey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
If you have questions or comments for the Arlington County Board Chair, give us a call at 800-433-8850. You can send email to kojo@wamu.org or shoot us a tweet at Kojo Show. Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe announced a deal this week to widen I-66 between the Dulles Connector Road and Ballston and add tolls to the route. It's a major commuter highway. What's, as far as you understand, is the plan and the timing?
So the plan is similar to the plan that he had out late last year, that many people approved. The only issue was the timing is completely changed on the widening. Originally, the plan was to have to make effort to see could we lower traffic by other means. We call it multimodal, getting people into transit, getting some other ways to have them more effectively use transportation and not just get single occupancy cars onto 66. And if that didn't work, we were to move to widening. And what happened, the deal that worked out was that the widening was going to happen a lot faster. And of course, their tolls
called
include.
it disappointing that they're going to do this widening. They're adding the one lane from Dulles to Boston right away.
Right.
But it's going to be within the right of way that already exists. They're not going to tear down homes. They're not going to.
Right.
What's the problem with widening the road?
Well, it's just they're not going to tear down homes, and we're going to be watching that very, very carefully. We've had a number of assurances that there really will not be that large an effect, but they're going to have to be doing some work and repairing particularly sound walls and working on the sound barriers. And to do that, they're going to have to go on private property, and I'm sure it's going to be quite disruptive for some folks. So we were hoping also just, Arlington really likes to promote transit and other ways of moving around than cars.
There are some sweeteners in the proposal. Arlington will get some of the toll money, as I understand it. Do you know how much it would be, or roughly how much?
No, that's being worked out. We're going to get a percentage of it, and I think a lot of those details are being worked out. So we will see.
Now, I looked at the road, and it's going to terminate in Boston. The extra lane Boston's is being redone. I mean, doesn't it need more traffic control there, more access to Boston as you try to remake Boston into something?
Right, and we were looking for access different ways than taking cars. But we're going to work with this. We're going to move forward and get the best out of it that we can. One of the things that I'm hoping to do is to really push harder in the region to get some really good regional east-west transit going, either down 66 or possibly down Route 50. We just need to find better ways for people to get in, and right now we're not providing what we ought to be providing.
Are you an Arlington resident, a Fairfax resident? What do you think about this deal? Give us a call, 800-433-8850. What about so-called reverse commuters? Will they have to pay the toll also?
In the deal, reverse commuters, as I'm remembering, will not, but we're going to see, they're going to work out all of the different kinds of tolling. There's going to be dynamic tolling. Dynamic tolling.
Oh,
so,
my Lord. I hope that's an official phrase.
It is, I think.
It's horrible.
I used to try to say something else. I think what it means is that when it's really crowded, it costs you more to be on the road, so you get fewer people. Uber pricing, that would be another way of putting it. Sure.
What if the district wanted to put a toll on the 14th Street Bridge going out into Arlington? Not in, but out.
What about it?
Would you support that?
I don't think so.
Why not?
Have to look at it. We need to actually make it easy for people to be moving around, and that's what we're looking at doing. And in fact, I think the tolling is supposed to do that in part, so that if you can't, if you really got to get somewhere, you're willing to pay a lot of money, you can do it. But I am worried about the region as a whole. We had the discussion with WMATA. We've got to be really focusing on metro, on buses, on all kinds of ways of getting around, just not just cars.
What did you think of the secretary there? He basically sounded like he was saying the federal government will cut back even more on its support of metro if the suburban Virginians and suburban Marylanders and district doesn't do something more.
Well, I hope we do something more, and I understand the secretary's frustration. I think everybody in this region is frustrated. It's time to, and I understand if you want different results, you got to do something differently. We've got to figure out a way to get metro safe, reliable, and efficient.
The deal the governor and lawmakers struck on I-66 may have gotten bipartisan support in the General Assembly, no small feat, but the issue is a divisive one in Northern Virginia. There's been friction between Arlington and Fairfax counties on this. What are the issues, and what does this deal mean for Arlington? As Tom pointed out, Arlington will be getting some of that toll money.
Right. Well, I think we're working There is some friction, but I think more and more moving forward, I've been reaching out a lot to my colleagues in the region, and so have my board colleagues. We've got 2 new board members, and I think we need to be cooperating. Transportation is something that cuts across boundaries. We've got to find ways to do a win-win. And so out of this, yes, we're going to do the widening, which will make some difficulties from Arlington, but we're going to have some support to improve things, and I think we can work together, and that's what we've got to do.
I want to go back for a second to Tom's earlier question about your thinking about what the transportation secretary said about Metro, because we have an individual on the line who seems to also have some thinking on this. His name may be familiar to you, Jerry Conley. Mr. Congressman, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Kojo. I just wanted to react, and I'm sorry the secretary still isn't there. If I understood it correctly, the secretary, in response to Tom's question, referred to Metro having, quote, a sweetheart deal for years, unquote, from the federal government.
I wanted to raise that issue with him as soon as he said the word sweetheart. I thought, that's called spousal abuse.
I actually had the same question, Congressman. Thanks for bringing it up.
I wanted to say something too, but then I said Jerry Conley is probably going to call. But go ahead.
So it's not, what is it? If it's not sweetheart, what is it?
And what's the deal?
If anyone has a sweetheart deal, it's the federal government that has a sweetheart deal, getting a free ride on Metro. I don't know where the secretary is coming from or who informed him, but it's a statement I hope he will rethink and retract. The federal government is the only compact member that doesn't put a dime on the table in terms of operating subsidies, putting the burden entirely on the localities to operate on a daily basis and the fare users. That's why we have the highest fare box recovery rate in the country, because we can't continue to rely on increasing subsidies. If the federal government were a partner in that, it could ease that burden considerably on everybody. And it would be fair, because the largest single beneficiary of daily Metro use is the federal government. And if you want to test that, shut down Metro and see what happens to the federal government. We have to go on liberal leave. We have to telework. All kinds of things, because the federal government can't operate.
He very boldly.
The only money we're getting from the federal government right now is $150 million matched dollar for dollar by the localities for capital expansion, and that's in the federal government's interest. So to have the Secretary of Transportation and a Democratic administration talk that way is deeply troubling.
So, Congressman,
I think the Secretary has to explain himself.
Congressman Libby here. Would you could we all go together and start talking about a dedicated stream of revenue with the feds?
Absolutely, but the first thing we've got to do is educate the Secretary of Transportation. Apparently,
he did say that. He very quickly and very bluntly suggested more federal money would be withheld if changes weren't made faster. I don't think there's anyone. Well, everyone believes that there ought to be fast changes and good changes, but I was surprised that he so quickly held out, we'll cut more funding if you guys don't do what we want.
Well, Tom, that sounds good, but starving the beast doesn't make anything better, as you know. And secondly, this is the secretary who had a chance to implement the recommendation in terms of oversight that I think would have been more robust, and chose not to do it for turf battle reasons. So, you can't have it both ways in talking about how Metro's doing. I'm a critic of Metro too. And at the same time, when you actually are a decision maker in terms of oversight of Metro, you kind of flinched.
So, Congressman, I think he's gotten our attention here, which maybe was the role. And I think we need to go get together and, again, talk about the dedicated stream of revenue and more support for the feds. And let's take this as an opening gambit for a good conversation that can move us forward.
Happy to do it.
Congressman Conley, thank you very much for your call.
Thank you
You
for
too can
letting me-
call us, 800-433-8850. We got an email from Karen in Arlington who says, how does all this, speaking of I-66, affect people trying to get from Arlington to Dulles Airport on 66? We've always been able to use 66 as long as we were going to the airport.
Yes, and not being charged on the access road. And that's one of the things that's been under negotiation. And I think they're still looking at that and looking at actually charging people. That Dulles Airport's not happy about that. There are many things the details that need to be worked out. There are a number of hearings coming up, and I would encourage folks to weigh in. There's a lot to be worked out yet.
It does seem to me that Northern Virginia is choking in traffic, and it seems like every time I read about this anywhere in the country, where there is an additional lane added or additional roads added in any urban area, that the traffic fills whatever you build, and that you cannot build your way out. And you said you'd like to see more transit. You were opposed, I think, to the streetcar idea. Rapid bus, you've got a new rapid bus system that's just about to start from Crystal City to Potomac Yard.
I got a question about that specifically
All right.
to add to Tom's question.
Well, I yield to the person who's calling.
Mark in Arlington writes in an email, why haven't we gotten a substantial plan for Columbia Pike Transportation Net? It's as if your priority with regard to the Columbia Pike streetcar was simply to kill it and offer South Arlington nothing in return. A handful of bus improvements doesn't count, says Mark.
Right. So we've all been frustrated, I think, about the time it has taken to change. If Mark had noticed, I became chair of the board on January 1st. And at that meeting, we don't usually do business, but there I made a motion. It was supported by all my colleagues to direct staff to come back with us with some really good recommendations on solid improvements to transit. I think it's been slow. We're all frustrated. We gave clear direction for staff to come back, and I think you're going to see that.
When would they come back?
They're coming back this spring, and we had a report just at our last meeting, and they're going to be coming back this spring because there's something called the Transportation Development Plan that we have to bring forward. Just talking a little bit, I would like to have folks, they might want to look at LA. In Los Angeles, my understanding is that they had the worst traffic in the nation. They don't anymore. And one of the things they instituted, it took them about 18 months, was a bus rapid transit system that increased the speed of the transit by 20%, ridership by 40%. They did not have a dedicated right-of-way. They just looked at what they could do and moved forward to do it. And I think we now have a board interested, willing, and quite determined to do that.
Well,
there are several people who'd like to weigh in on the I-66 issue.
I yield to the people.
Here is Bill in Alexandria, Virginia. Bill, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Kojo. Big fan. Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to comment. I'd love to hear your and Sherwood's response as well as the other panel member there. You know, when I moved to Northern Virginia in the mid-'90s, Prince William was considered kind of an exotic outer ring suburb. And, you know, now 15, 20 years later, you have these commuters. People are coming from Fauquier, even further out along 66. So I think the solution is not to widen 66. It's just going to cause a bottleneck there at Boston where everybody's got to merge back in to fewer lanes. The issue has got to be to control development, make it enticing for people to live closer to where they work. So I think groups like the Coalition for Smarter Growth that are big proponents of limiting the development, there's got to be a way to control these massive developments.
See what the board chair has to say about that.
Arlington has grown to 10% of population growth since 2010.
That's right.
And it is getting more dense.
Right, but we've hardly had any increase actually on our own roads from commuters because we have also promoted, you know, we've got metro, we've got transit, so you make it dense and you get people onto public transit, they walk, we've got bike share. So we're doing fine here. I would hardly feel like I could tell Loudoun and Fairfax and other places what to do. One point I'd like to make, Bill, that has been interesting to me is that what we're told is studies show that the traffic coming in on 66, 45% of it leaves 66 by the time they get to Ballston. So that widening by the time we get to Ballston, we're assured, will actually help make a difference. And that gives us a little more time, I think, that may make a difference. We've got to really pump up the transit so that we don't have to widen again or try to do anything more.
Why
more
do
cars
they
isn't
by
the
the
answer.
time they get to Boston? Because we got an email from Christine who says, I'm living in Arlington and I'm constantly upset by how the county is already used as a cut-through by drivers who don't want to deal with rush hour traffic on major arteries. These drivers already show little regard for Arlington residents and speed limits on residential streets. I'm concerned that the situation is going to be much worse with the 66 toll lanes. How will the county protect against it?
Well, we're going to do everything we can, and we're going to be vigilant. That was one of my concerns, and we've asked for some good modeling. And again, really stepping up the pressure on the transit coming in east-west, so that more people will ride, buses, carpool, and find different ways of getting in. I understand and completely share your frustration. We've been doing things. We've got some traffic calming and humps and making it difficult for people to do that. But we also need to make it easier for people to just stick on the main routes and get to where they need to
be. The beloved hump. Go ahead,
before
please.
you're almost out of time, I think, but we cannot. Here is the solution that we have yet to discuss: the gondola.
Yes.
The gondola.
Yes,
Now,
to that.
I'm told that
Arlington recently approved a feasibility study for a gondola between Roslyn and Georgetown.
yes, well, yes, they part of the cost. It's going to be shared by others too. But I'm told Key Bridge has 50,000 vehicles a day on Key Bridge. I'm told that sidewalk to and from Georgetown and Arlington, of course, is the busiest sidewalk in Arlington. But other people just laugh at this idea that a gondola could serve Arlington in a beneficial way.
You think it's a fanciful
you
idea?
didn't like it to begin with. You kind of said, okay, well, let's study it. But what is your feeling about the gondola?
I'm skeptical. I think the whole board is skeptical. The Georgetown bid came to us asking to help with the study a couple of years ago, and we said, well, see if you can get some other people interested in this as well. And they came back and they had Georgetown University in their bid and the District of Columbia and our own bid, that's Business and Improvement District in Roslyn. So there's some folks that think this is a really good idea. As I say, I'm skeptical. The board's skeptical. The business community stepped up and put in a little bit more money, so we're not paying more than the district. And so we're going to look at the study. One more thing, I find when you've got these ideas that everybody's really interested in, they can just stew and cause a lot of trouble. And if you don't have good facts to actually talk about it, it's really not a very productive conversation. So I'm hoping by putting in a little bit of money, we'll get some facts on the table and then we'll all know what we're talking about.
I would just say Joe Sternley, who runs the Georgetown bid, is very excited about this. But I'm thinking all these, I would think thousands of people who would come over the bridge from Arlington into Georgetown, where will they go? There's no metro stop there. The bus service there on K Street. It seems to me like I don't know what's going to happen at the end of it. But
you can read this. We'll send you a copy of the study when it comes back.
For you, I mean, people come to Arlington. They
Mm-hmm.
go to Roslyn.
Sure.
They go to the cemetery. They go to the Marine Corps Memorial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're a great place to visit, and we're going to find out if there's a benefit to us. That's the point of doing a study, and we wanted to be good partners. You've got, be good partners with folks in the region, and so we're going to do the study, and we'll see.
Libby Garvey, she is the Arlington County Board Chair. Tom Sherwood is thinking of moving to Arlington,
No,
Really? We have wonderful places to live.
No.
Yeah,
I was over there the other day trying to find a parking space, but we won't get into that now.
Libby Garvey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a reporter with NBC4 and a columnist with the current newspapers. Coming up, Yvette Alexander, D.C. Council member. She's a Democrat representing Ward 7. If you have questions or comments for her, you can call us at 800-433-8850 or send email to kojo@wamu.org. Go to our website, kojoshow.org. Watch the live stream of the broadcast there. Tom Sherwood, this week, Dr. Juliet Saucy, the medical director of D.C. Fire and EMS, quit, citing dysfunction within that department. When she was a guest on this show yesterday, she said that she was essentially dissatisfied with the fact that the medical director has no real authority in a culture that badly needs reforming, and that she couldn't implement her ideas to reform it.
Well, she also, didn't she say on your show that she didn't mean for her scathing resignation letter to become public?
That's what she said.
Well, I'm not sure you write a letter that you don't want to become public like that. But anyway, she said that. I know that Ed Smith, the head of the union, and was hopeful of her appointment, said that she gave up too soon. That yes, it's difficult. The whole problem needs to be solved. But she said, I mean, her letter is in fact scathing about what happens. But again, she left right in the middle of the battle. A little bit surprised by that.
And the fire chief says that she came in knowing what the system was and that they were on their way to reforming it. I guess we'll just have to see how this all plays out.
Chief Dean, of course, wants to change the ambulance service, which we're talking about. So what is it, 80-something% more than 80% of the fire EMS is about medical emergencies, not fires. And Chief Dean says he wants to change it, but how fast, we have yet to see.
Joining us in studio is Yvette Alexander. She is a D.C. Council member, a Democrat representing Ward 7. Yvette Alexander, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kojo.
Nothing going on in your world.
Last week, after months of speculation, former Mayor Vincent Gray announced he would run for his old Ward 7 seat, your seat at the moment. You were formerly close with Gray. I noticed you're not wearing gloves, so this is going to be
I'm wearing gray today. Oh
it's
my
gonna-
God.
you're not wearing gloves. It's going to be a bare knuckle brawl is what's going to happen here. Well, you were considered something of a protege to Vincent Gray, but that seems to have changed. He's criticized you right now out of the gate. What happened? What happened to your relationship?
Well, actually, nothing happened with the relationship as far as I'm concerned. I know that, he's no longer in elected office. He lost in the primary to now Mayor Muriel Bowser, and we have not talked since he left office in December of, 2014. So, I mean, I haven't spoken with him.
Is it possible that because after he left office, you were reported as being more closely allied with Mayor Bowser? Is it possible that that could have led to the lack of communication between you?
Yeah, well, I just want to put it out there as far as him putting in his bid to run in Ward 7. I think he needs to be honest with the residents of Ward 7 and the residents of the District of Columbia that I think it's more revenge and retaliation. I think he has his eyes on the mayor's seat and he wants to get back, and he's going to use any avenue he can to do that. And he really needs to be honest about it.
Politics is a blood sport. It can be very difficult. Did Mayor Gray give you any heads up? Did he call you? I mean, you guys do go way back. You supported each other on a variety of things. Did he call you and say, Yvette, I want you to know it's not this is what Marion Barry used to say. When Marion Barry ran against Wilhelmina Rolark and against Sandy Allen, he told them, it's not personal, it's politics.
Right, and that's fair.
Did Gray
Not
talk to you?
at all. And I've seen him at several meetings. I've seen him at, funerals. I've seen him out and about. And actually, I've initiated even speaking to him. So no, he gave no indication. And when I hear criticism about my leadership, about, my job as Ward 7 council member, he never, ever expressed any dissatisfaction with me.
Chuck Thies, who is his treasurer for this Ward 7 race, but ran his mayor's race in 2014, has said that, well, Vince Gray is just disappointed that you haven't been a better council member, that you haven't shown any strong any result as the council member, and he wants to take over.
And Chuck Thies, let me just say this. For one, Chuck Thies knows nothing about Ward 7, excuse me.
Probably Ward 8 too. No, I'm sorry.
Maybe not Ward 1 either, but Chuck Thies knows nothing about Ward 7. He's Vince Gray's treasurer, which is an insult because I'm sure that there are a bunch of qualified treasurers in Ward 7. And he's a spokesperson too. I would like to hear from the person who is running in Ward 7. Let's hear from him. Chuck Thies really has no knowledge of anything in Ward 7. And it's an insult to the residents of Ward 7 that Vince Gray even chose him, an outsider, as his treasurer. I've had the same treasurer for all 4 of my elections. I've had that consistency.
How difficult of a challenge will it be for you to be going up against the former mayor?
I don't think it'll be a difficult challenge. I'm the incumbent. I have a track record. And I'm proud of it. And I will really speak the truth to power with regards to the race and the accomplishments and what could have been done. I think that Vince Gray as mayor was in the best position to do the most for Ward 7. So he'll have to answer to the residents of Ward 7.
They just tweeted out today that he's going to have his campaign kickoff on Saturday, March 5th, but they don't know yet where. Have you had a campaign kickoff? I know you formally were in.
My campaign kickoff was October 1st of last year, and I've had an outpouring of support. And actually, I've had even more persons vocalizing their support for me with this Vince Gray announcement.
Let's talk about the shadow campaign that ensnarled Mayor Gray as his term in office, even for those people who think he was a good mayor. It ended in December when the prosecutor's office, Channing Phillips, a new U.S. attorney, just announced the prosecution was over and there'd be no more indictments and that Mayor Gray wasn't indicted. It is still a huge, wrote about this week, there's still a huge mystery as to why the prosecutors decided that Jeffrey Thompson wasn't reliable enough to put on the stand if they were to charge Gray with a crime. Where does the shadow campaign fit in your political world when you deal with Mayor Gray? You tried to defend him when he was under investigation. Where does it fit now?
Yeah, well, the shadow campaign, I will say this, Vince Gray had a very good attorney. And unfortunately, some of the persons who worked on his campaign, obviously, they did not. There were several indictments with regards to the shadow campaign. But Tom, we can't give him a break or a pass based on his 2010 mayoral campaign. There were a lot of indiscrepancies.
Yeah, the audit came
with
out.
that.
The audit came out.
Almost $1 million.
He
It was
said
pretty
it was
bad.
just bookkeeping errors.
Well, no, I mean, we know how meticulous. I know in terms of my leadership, I've had seamless campaigns.
Is this an
You know
issue
how
you'll
to
be
run
raising?
it.
Is this an issue you'll
This
be
is a
raising during the
definite
campaign?
issue. I think that he does not deserve a pass even to run with all of the flaws and the mismanagement and the questionable activity in his, not his shadow campaign, but in his actual mayoral campaign. It's all an insult. And I'm offended by that.
Jeffrey Thompson, who is the key centerpiece person in the shadow campaign scandal, is going to be sentenced by the courts on June 6th, which is just, 8 days before the June 14th primary. Some people are suggesting that even more details will come out about that. Are you expecting to hear more?
I guess the decision was made, but if you ask the voters of Ward 7, go to Hillcrest and ask anyone if they feel that Vince Gray knew anything about a shadow campaign. Just ask the residents. People talk. There's a whisper, but, maybe people aren't as confident. So I'm going to put it out there as the Ward 7 council member. Ask the people of Ward 7, did he know anything? And I think you'll get the answer to your question.
The other side of that coin, though, is that around the city, and I certainly haven't polled Ward 7, but around the city, there seems to be a fairly widespread sentiment that it was the U.S. Attorney's action before the primary that upset Vince Gray's 2014 campaign, and that has generated a great deal of sympathy amongst quite a few residents in the city. Can that be a factor in this campaign?
I'm sure it didn't help his campaign. I'm sure it didn't help. But if you could go to some of the persons who worked on his previous mayoral campaign, if you could go to them and ask how they were treated during the first campaign, I think his defeat was due in part to a ground team that was very dissatisfied with his first campaign.
Another political question. Mayor Bowser has said nice things about you. She's indicated she's going to support you. I think she has said that publicly. Mm-hmm. What is her own reputation in Ward 7? She's still establishing herself. We could get to the homeless shelters and but all those things that are now going to happen. Are you embracing Mayor Bowser and welcoming her support?
Almost definitely. And I can give you one example how Ward 7 residents really need to be encouraged by our collaboration with regards to the Skyline development. There was still a covenant in place, Tom. There was still a covenant in place that prevented any development in terms of Walmart to even go there. And she condemned that covenant. And I think that is the beginning of her commitment to working with me and working with the residents.
So Mayor Gray messed up the Skyline event.
Well, let's get to that. Walmart pulled out of, for those listeners who may not know of it, Walmart pulled out of building its final 2 stores in the district, both of which were slated for your ward, Skyland Town Center and Capitol Gateway. What went wrong in your view? Who was to blame?
Yeah, what went wrong was that...
There's no chance to say Mayor Gray is to blame for not putting those stores first. But you go ahead and say it if you want to.
Well, I mean, I was there in Vegas when the handshake deal, so to speak, was made. There have been leases signed, but there was also that covenant in place that was a shock to everyone that that covenant still was in question.
Is that and you're talking about the
Safeway's covenant?
Safeway, which is across Alabama Avenue,
yeah,
said you could not have a competing store selling foodstuffs, which Walmart does, within a certain space. And exactly. I think the city had to agree to pay several $1 million to Safeway to get that.
But the first step would have been to condemn the covenant, and that was not done under Vince Gray's leadership. And then once the covenant was removed, lo and behold, they pull out. So that was not, Mayor Bowser's fault for sure. The whole deal and all the negotiation was under the former administration. And you're exactly right. When he talks in Ward 7, he touts about City Center and the Costco and Fort Lincoln, and all those are great. But what about Penn Branch? What about Skyland? What about the very things in Ward 7 that are in your direct vicinity to your home? That if we work together, and I do know some of the stories based on why some of those projects have been hauled, and it could have been worked out, but there were other priorities, and we were not one.
On this broadcast, the former mayor said that he got the developments on his watch and that it was on Mayor Bowser's watch that the developments were dropped, that she, and by implication you, were not paying enough attention to what was going on.
Oh, no, that's completely not true. As a matter of fact, he left the covenant in place. And I don't want to get in his relationship we might have had with Safeway or who was representing Safeway at the time, but let's not get into
that. You just did.
Let's not get into that.
That's a curveball. What does that mean?
Well, that means that let's get to some of my accomplishments and the reason why I want to stay here in Ward 7. I'm not here to bash Vince Gray, but I think that the people of Ward 7 will definitely speak. It's an insult.
All right, what is your view right now? This week there were hearings on the new sporadic these homeless shelters. I'm sorry, trying to find the right word. All 8 wards. People didn't know that Mayor Bowser said all 8 wards, but there's going to be new housing, public or shelter housing for homelessness in all 8 wards. She's delivered on that now. And what is your reaction to the ones in Ward 7?
In Ward 7, well, we had our meeting last night as across the city, and they're temporary housing.
How many was
shelters.
It? 50?
No, we have actually the lowest amount, 35 families in Ward 7. It's on 50th and D Street Southeast. And the residents were fairly supportive of it. They were just worried about if the actual services will be in place for the families to be able to actually support themselves and to get out of the homeless predicament. So, I mean, we were fairly supportive. We are no stranger to some of the ills that have fallen down on our residents.
We have a question about that issue from Peter in Northeast Washington. Peter, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Hi, how are you?
We're well.
Good. How are you, council member?
I'm well. Thank you for calling in.
Good. I just had a question. I was anxious to ask. We were raising the issue of the homeless, and there are hundreds of homeless people, and we're hearing things about the conditions in the motels and hotels that they're staying in. Mm-hmm. And I was just curious, since you have oversight of that committee, why haven't you personally visited any of the residents?
I have visited personally low barrier shelters as well as the family shelter at DC General. Now, the motel and hotel on New York Avenue, I do plan some visits there. My committee director, Ms. Barlow, has scheduled some visits. We're in performance oversight hearings session now, so it is kind of difficult between community meetings and my hearings, but I do plan to visit some of the motels that I have received some concern about. And eventually, with our plan to end family homelessness and to shut down DC General, we have taken a very active role, or the Director of Human Services has taken a very active role to put those persons, those families in the motels into permanent housing.
Does the mayor risk a political pushback? I mean, I asked her last night, all of this plan to have these 400 homes in all 8 wards, well, it's supposedly going to be done in the middle of 2018. That's the next mayor's race. If she doesn't get it done, very political fallout. If she gets it done, some people may not like it. It's political fallout. What do you think about the whole idea of scattering these shelters throughout the city?
I'm really excited about it. I think we've had the burden in Ward 7 with DC General there. And homelessness is an issue across the city that we all need to take a stake in, and we all need to solve this problem and be aware of the problem. So I think it's a great plan. And this is the first initial step. Of course, the Interagency Council on Homelessness also has the Homeward DC plan. So this is one step in the plan. And thus far, it's a great plan, and the council is very supportive. The majority of the council is supportive. So the mayor is well on the way of sticking to a commitment that was made for many years, and she's finally taking action.
Our guest is Yvette Alexander. She's a DC council member. She's a Democrat representing Ward 7, running for re-election. Here now is Travis, who identifies himself as a Ward 7 resident. Travis, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
This will be paid leave, I know.
Oh, you know
Yeah,
Travis.
Yes.
It is
Well,
paid
thank
leave.
you.
Yes. Go ahead,
Yes,
Travis.
Thank you, council member, for your time, and thank you, Kojo. My name is Travis Valley, and I'm a proud Ward 7 resident. Last night, I testified in front of the DC Council in favor of paid parental and family leave for all DC residents, because it really is the best way our city can expand reproductive
What,
freedom.
therefore, is your question for the council?
Yes. So my one question for the council member, as I consider whether or not to vote for you in this close election, is that I nearly died right after I was born. I was born 2 months premature. My mom could not choose between paying the rent and spending time with her very sick newborn. As far as I can tell, you've left it to other council members to move forward a bill that our Ward 7, will benefit the most from in our city.
Is there a question?
Council
Travis,
member,
I know what
why
you-
is your
yeah.
leadership missing? Why is your leadership missing on this core progressive issue?
Yeah, Travis, and I appreciate all your work.
Sounds like
with
there's some
women's-
history here.
with women's reproductive rights. Travis is a new resident to our Randall Highlands area, and he's been very active from day one of his moving into the ward,
Which is a good thing.
which is a good thing.
Active citizens.
But Travis, one issue, you know, I'm not a one issue council member, but let me just tell you this. We have a lot of work to do. From that introduction of that bill, we need to be mindful of employers. My first focus is on actually getting our Ward 7 residents to work. Okay, so I am very supportive of that. I've had several members of my own staff who have been out for a long time, almost a year, due to an illness. So I have wholeheartedly supported that. But we need to work out some of the kinks in the legislation. Overall, I think it's a good thing. We've done many things in support of our workers. So let's see where the bill goes. We've moved from 16 weeks now to 12 weeks. So there's going to be further work with this bill. So I can say that I would be willing to support it, but it has to make sense for the business community. It has to make sense for the city. It has to make sense for our residents. Thanks for calling in, Travis.
And now here is Chris in Washington, D.C. Chris, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Kojo. Hi, Yvette. This is Chris with DCForReality.org. Just wanted to check.
Every activist in town. Go ahead.
Yvette, you've been there for a long time. I appreciate your service to the city, and you know I'm a citywide activist, and I look at the Skyland deal. You know, $90 million investment from the city, and it was predicated on Walmart being there. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering, what will you do to see that either the city recoups some of that investment? In other words, it was a $40 million TIF, and then,
right,
and then another $40 million to buy the land and all that, and we gave it to the Virginia developer Rappaport. I mean, for very little money.
Okay, your question.
Okay, what's next?
The question is, what is next? Right? What will you do to get back from Rappaport the land or the money that was predicated on Walmart being there?
Well, I can tell you this too, Chris, and we've talked to Gary Rappaport. He's committed. He's lost quite a bit of money. He's not making money thus far on that deal either. He's committed to seeing this development through. I'm committed to seeing this development through, as well as Mayor Bowser. Walmart is not the end-all be-all, though we are still working with them. I'll have to be honest about it. But we are also approaching other retailers and other options.
Big box retailers?
Yeah, big box.
But wait a minute, some small
so
local,
it's not over.
Some small local business advocates are hoping the city would consider a proposal for a kind of local mart, bringing in some of the prominent local independent businesses as anchor tenants, restaurants like Busboys and Ports, Gina Schaefer's and her Ace Hardware stores.
Yeah,
here.
well, we're looking at the big boxes first because that was the plan. So we really don't want further delay with the plan, but we're
You need
looking.
an anchor tenant, even
Yeah,
if you have all of those stores.
Exactly. And
and
maybe
restaurants.
Capital Gateway may be a little bit different in terms of Skyland, but our options are open. So, we're willing to look at everything because we want to get the development done.
The new Lowe's out by South Dakota is terrific space where the Costco is, and there's plans to build like 2,500 new townhomes out there. It does show that if you have a anchor tenant,
exactly.
you can build around
and
it.
the difference now with both developments, they're ready for development. There are no more covenants. There are no more lawsuits. So it paints a
The
different
land has
picture.
been cleared.
Yes. So it paints a different picture to make it more attractive.
When are you
for
going to
other
have
retailers.
a forum with you and Mayor Gray? No.
Hey, well, we
Well,
have to be
you'll do anything you
certified
can,
as
right?
candidates. We're circulating petition
Well, that's early March.
signatures right now. So, I mean, hey, he may not get signatures. We don't know.
Here is
So-
Kendall in Washington, D.C. Kendall, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Kojo. Good to talk with you and everyone. Good as an afternoon. Good afternoon, Yvette, Alexander.
Hi, Kendall. I know this is Kendall Bryan, too. I know everyone that calls him because I know my residents.
I know we're almost out of time. Kendall, what's your question?
Okay, well, let's get right to it. Well, I just think that the media doesn't talk up Yvette's record in the ward. She's been all over the ward, especially here in Deanwood, where I am. She's been working very hard with the community organizations. I hope that she could briefly talk about her oversight of the DC Trust. People don't talk about she is the
That's
one.
it. Oversight of the D.C. Trust. You got 30 seconds. Go.
I have allocated a lot of money for our children, for after school programs, for during school programs. Children are our priority, and that's where our investment is, and I put it there for Ward 7 and for the city.
Yvette Alexander. She's a D.C. council member. She's a Democrat representing Ward 7 who is running for re-election. Thank you very much for joining us. Good luck to you.
Thank you, Kojo.
Tom
you.
Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a reporter with NBC4. He's a columnist with the current newspapers. He's also looking forward to debates between Yvette Alexander and everyone else who is contesting, including former Mayor Vincent Gray. Will you moderate?
Yes, I will. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you all for
everyone.
listening. I'm Kojo Nahandi.